Thus, by the time the trial rolled around, things got a little more complicated. Shaw remained adamant in his estimate of between 7:30 and 7:45, but Ainsworth had a much wider window. Now he said he and Shaw could have heard the sounds anywhere from 6 p.m. to when the customer came in a bit past 8. The defense alleged that in the time between that evening and the trial, Ainsworth had become prejudiced against Oland and had changed his account to help the Crown's case. Ainsworth was adamant his initial statement was only an on-the-spot guesstimate, and there was never a time he could have been 100% certain he had not heard the sounds before 7 or even 6:30. So for now, let's just split the difference and say that the accounts of Ainsworth and Shaw offer some chance that Dennis Oland has an alibi. How do we reconcile his innocence with some of the evidence we've covered that seems to scream guilt? The big two the defense had to contend with were the blood-stained jacket and the cell tower. Saving the, for lack of a better term, best for last, we'll start with the cell tower. The first thing to take into account is that Richard's phone pinging off the tower, most likely to correspond with Rentforth Wharf, doesn't mean his phone was at Rentforth Wharf. It just means it was likely in and around the general area that tower normally services, in which Rentforth Wharf is just one of many locations. The cell tower evidence can be presented in a way that paints a picture of Dennis and the killer being in the same location, which seems like a fanciful coincidence. But when you consider it could also mean Dennis being at the wharf while the killer is fleeing the crime scene, driving along a route which puts them in range of the Rothsay Tower. When Richard Oland's mistress sends his phone a text, it's still a very unfortunate coincidence to be sure, but perhaps not one that is quite in the realm of fantasy. It's also worth noting that the obvious insinuation with Dennis Oland taking the phone to the wharf is that he disposed of it there. The iPhone has never been recovered, despite thorough searches of the area, including in the water. As for the blood on the jacket, Oland's defense pointed out that no blood was visible on the jacket, or any of his clothes, or body, in any of the security footage from the evening. So while one could look at the dry cleaning and infer it was part of a cover-up, we're not looking at a suspect who was drenched in blood to begin with, which intuitively you would expect one to be if they carried out a murder as brutally violent as the one that created the scene in Richard Oland's office. There were also no bloody footprints in the office, no blood detected in Dennis Oland's car, no blood anywhere on anything he owned, barring the few minute spots on the brown sports jacket. And the defense argued, even after dry cleaning, if Dennis Oland was guilty, there should be a lot more blood detectable on that jacket. The obvious counter to that is that if he isn't guilty, there shouldn't be any. To deal with that, the defense put forward the following explanation for how Richard Oland's blood could have innocuously wound up on the jacket, that they contended was much more consistent with the volume of blood found than spatter from a bludgeoning. Richard Oland habitually chewed his cuticles, sometimes drawing blood, and additionally would sometimes scratch and pick at scabs on his head, also making him liable to wind up with crusty blood on the tips of his fingers. Dennis, as well as several other witnesses, testified that Richard was touchy when it came to social interactions, the sort of man who would grasp your shoulder when giving you a handshake. So it could have been something like that caused tiny specks of blood to be transferred to Dennis's jacket. Dennis also stored some of his clothes, including the jacket, in Richard's closet for a time while his house was being renovated. On occasion, Richard would confuse some of Dennis's clothes for his own, providing another potential opportunity for transfer. These are just a sampling of some of the arguments and evidence presented over the course of Dennis Oland's marathon 65-day trial. His defense team scrutinized every piece of the Crown's evidence from just about every angle one could think of. And finally, after about 30 hours of deliberations, stretched over the course of 4 days,
the jury signaled that they had reached a verdict, and then, of course, Dennis Oland was recalled to the courthouse. He entered in with his family and was sitting there as the foreman read out that verdict, guilty. At that point, there was absolute shock in the courtroom, and Dennis Oland doubled over.